me ask you another question. Start. When you want to make out, who do you make out to? Sinatra or Mathis?
That's a stupid question.
One question. Answer that.
It's irrelevant. I won't answer it. Mathis.
What about you, Shreve?
I'm married. We don't make out.
Hello, friends. Another edition of Just a Couple of Guys is about ready for production. Cast includes producer Paul Stuco, man behind the curtain. Everyone's known what Paul's wearing today. Penn State sweatshirt. Was hot today, maybe shorts. And of course, you know he's wearing his Bite Me hat. Yours truly, 𝐕𝐵𝐿𝐿 also provide thoughtful questions for our guests. But the star of this production is our resident comedian, Pat Crimmins. Pat has been drooling at the opportunity to go mano a mano with our special guest, Paul Reiser, movie and television actor, stand-up comic, author, producer, and composer. Paul will be performing at the Batavia Fine Arts Centre on March 8th. We'll have more information about how you can get tickets later on. And Pat, this guy just doesn't seem to show any signs of slowing down. He's quite an accomplished performer.
Yeah, I don't want to disrespect any other guests we've had in the past, but he seems to be one of our more qualified stars in all sorts of different areas. Writer, producer, star, comedian. I don't know what else there is. He's a composer. So he wears many, many hats, and he's funny to boot.
Yes, and of course, some of his movie credits are familiar to most of our audience, and we'll get into a lot of the other stuff he does as well. So Paul Reiser will join us on the other side of a commercial break. You stay tuned, stay put, do not move. We'll be right back.
Tony, your parents know you're over here again, right?
Yep.
Great.
Tony lives next door. See, his parents decided to just use their phone for home internet. So when everyone is on, Tony's over here streaming and drinking all my soda.
My dog.
Switch to fast internet on the Xfinity 10G network today. The future starts now.
We're going to bed, Tony.
Good night. I'll lock up if I leave.
Get real home internet on the next generation 10G network only from Xfinity.
Hello, friends. This is 𝐕𝐵𝐿𝐿. You face technology challenges every day that threaten to steal business, compromise data, and bring your business down. Without a good partner to help protect from phishing, ransomware, viruses, data breaches, employee turnover, and cybersecurity threats, your business is at risk of losing everything. TechWorks has been the trusted IT partner to Fox Valley businesses for over 20 years, keeping systems secure and providing extraordinary customer service, helping your business grow. Call TechWorks today at 630-482-2227 or visit www.techworks.com. That's TechWorks with a Q. TEQ works, and see how TechWorks IT service can transform and secure your business. Well, we're back and very, very pleased to have with us an accomplished man. And I say accomplished, I'm talking about movies, television, writing, composing, producing, and of course, one of his claims to fame is stand-up comic. That's Mr. Paul Reiser. And Paul, it's really a pleasure to have you on Just a Couple of Guys today. Welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
And before I turn this over to my partner, who has a number of questions,
all right,
just ask a simple one. Let our audience know a little bit about your family. And you're from New York City originally, but where you're residing at now.
I grew up in New York City, and I moved out to California because that was sort of required of anybody with a comedy or television aspiration. So I only recently realized I have been in California significantly longer than I was ever in New York, but I still think of myself as a New Yorker. And my wife and I have two boys the boys both grew up from day one in Los Angeles. And one of my greatest joys and points of pride is that they both vaguely have a New York accent. So if I've done nothing else, I've left them that.
All right. And it's raining in Los Angeles, as you said.
Well, now today it's beautiful. As we speak, it is beautiful, but we just got over 3 days of biblical rains. It was truly kind of rain where you look and go, how could there be that much water in the sky? It doesn't seem possible.
Pat?
Well, I've done some research on you, and obviously I graduated from college in the late 80s, so with Diner and everything else, you're somewhat of a hero of mine. But what I wanted to start with is the beginnings of your career as a stand-up. With the research that I did do, I know you talked to your family about it, and the idea of comedy was kind of a hobby, I guess. As you were attending college, you would go out and do sets. I think it was in the Greenwich Village.
Yeah. Well, my father was a very successful businessman of his own making. He started a company. He started a business right before the war, in like 1939, 1940, and grew it, through the sweat of his brow. And his dream was always that I would take it over. And there's nothing that parents want to hear more that their college graduate son's plan of attack is, here's what it is, folks. I'm going to go to comedy clubs starting around 12:30 at night. I won't be making money for probably 5 years, but I will be getting free cocktails and meeting girls. And so that's not the most solid, reassuring thing for parents to hear. But in the end, it all worked out, and they were very, I remember it was never real to them until I did the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. That was the currency that mattered to us too, to comedians. That was your sign of approval. But to parents, for sure, they go, well, you're on Johnny Carson. You must be for real. So that was the turning point for the parental approval.
When did you know, if you've ever known, when did you know you were funny, and how did that lead to the desire to become a stand-up?
I don't know if I knew I was funny. I just loved, I loved comedy. I was drawn to it. And I guess I was, I tried to get laughs in school. By the time I got to high school, I had another buddy who was also into comedy. And we realized that if you're too successful at cut up, you're going to get tossed. So we had to be very judicious and we won't even say anything till 20 minutes in to the 40-minute class. Then you say that, and then 10 minutes later, I'll do the punchline. So we knew that you had to hopefully get a laugh from the teacher, but you want to get the laugh more than you wanted to disrupt. So it was always a science to me. It was always something that I loved. And, when I grew up, as aside from watching the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, to me, it was always watching the comics. So by the time I was in high school, and I would, stay up late or sneak the TV on because Tonight Show didn't start till 11:30, and the comics wouldn't come on till 12 on a school night. But if George Carlin was on, or Richard Pryor, or Steve Martin, or Robert Klein, or David Brenner, I was going to be, or Rodney Dangerfield, I would be, or Albert Brooks. Those are my heroes. They were never actors. They were never, my heroes were always comics. So I was just drawn to it and love it. And, I took such a long time off, not by design. I just kind of did. When Mad About You started in '92, I got busy with the show. And then when it was over, after 7 years, I kind of was happy to be home. And suddenly I realized I had not been out performing. And it was, at the time, was almost 20 years. So when I went back, it was an interesting thing because I totally lost the muscle. You have to really develop the comedy muscle. But what I realized that very first night back was, oh, I love this. This is what I missed. And so, you know, coming to your town on March 8th, you know, at the lovely, tell them the name of the town where I'll be. The Batavia Fine Arts Centre.
Yes.
And it's Center, CENTRE. So you know it's fancy.
That's right. That's right. Nothing but the best. That's why you're hosting there.
We were watching a show the other night called 𝐵elgravia, and I was about to say, "But no, you're not in 𝐵elgravia. It's Batavia, very close."
Now, but you went to college for music and composition, and then you kept doing stand-up. So, were these forces resisting each other, or is it just...
the music was always my, you know, in a way, it was my path of least resistance. I took piano lessons when I was a kid, and I was sort of drawn to that, and you know, so and then the college I went to had this program that if you had, it was like the Miss America. If you have a special skill, you get a little extra point. So I got in as a piano student, and it was sort of easier in a way that I like, but without even working too hard, I had gotten half my credits. I went, all right, this is cool. But I knew, I never was really seriously entertaining the idea that that would be my career. I knew as a performer, I wasn't in that world at all. Like that, you got to be in the exceptional, you know, 1%, half of 1%, and I was not. I could play at a party and somebody go, "Whoa, that's not bad." That's about the extent of it. But the comedy, you know, so they were maybe in the back of my mind, they were conflicted. I think the conflict was, you know, the pull to go into my dad's business and do the parentally approved plan, or branch out into this other crazy world. And that was the conflict. But, you know, and people say, well, you've done all these TV shows in the last few years have been, you know, these very high visibility shows, Stranger Things and The Boys and Kominsky Method. And they go, well, that must be cool. I say, yeah, but it's not as much fun to me as doing stand-up. It's like, you know, you do a show and you don't really know what it looks like till it's put together 15 months later. Stand-up, it's just live, you know, there's live people and they're sitting, they're not on Zoom like you and me. They're in their chairs, they're looking, they're there. And it's a wonderful communal thing, you know, and I've been doing this long enough. So now when the audience, and certainly in the Chicago area, there's always a great crowd. It's a great comedy town. And I've always had a great time there. But, you know, when I get on stage at this point, people know me, you know, and I feel like when I get out there, I feel like I know them. So it always feels like getting together with old friends. You know, it's a great, it's never a disappointment. I always have fun and the audience seems to go home happy.
I don't know if you've heard this before. I'm sure you have, but I mean, you make me laugh regardless of the content of what you're saying. Just the way you say it. And, you know, so that's always been a thing for me. And, stand-up.
That's very flattering. Another way of looking at Patrick is, if you look closely, I got no act. So, you know, but if you talk fast enough, they go, I think it was funny. It seemed funny.
That's right. It's like, what's that guy's name? Mancalso or something. He can contort his face and he makes me laugh. I don't know what it is. But I wanted to talk a little bit about stand-up and how it's changed over time. You took that long pause that you talked about.
Yes.
But you hear from the comics, Seinfeld and these other guys, that the audience has changed a little bit. They're a little sensitive and the correctness and everything else. Have you found that to be an issue?
No, I haven't. You know, I get asked about that by people, you know, doing interviews and stuff. And, you know, the world has changed in a good way. I mean, I don't think being politically correct or being aware and being sensitive to what you say is a bad thing. That's a good thing. Right. Are there times where you go, geez, you know, people got a little sensitive, and yeah, it can sometimes go a little off the rails. But in general, I think it's a good thing that people go, you know what, that's not such a cool thing to say anymore. And like, we probably shouldn't have been saying it ever. But also, you know, my thing, I've never been cutting edge. I've never been pushing, you know, pushing the envelope. it's never been a goal of mine to make people squirm. I want you to have a great time, and we have a good time and people laugh. And I got a pretty quick trigger sensitivity. So I will get offended before anybody else does. So and sometimes if it's questionable, I'll go, you know what? I'm just not going to say it because it might get taken the wrong way. I can share that at home. But I find, and in fact, if I may, people say, has comedy changed? And to me, it's one of the few things that hasn't changed. When I went back after all those years off and I got back on stage in my 60s, it felt exactly like I did when I first went up at 19. I went, oh, it's just as exciting. It's just as frightening. It's just as elusive. And there are not too many things you can do in your 60s that feel like you did when you were 19 or 20. Basically nothing. But stand-up, there's nothing. It's the most low-tech thing. There's no app to make you better faster. You just got to go up every night. And by the way, you could be great on Tuesday and you miss it on Wednesday. So it's just you and the audience, and that's what makes it so fun.
Where are you finding your material in this most recent tour that you're on? Is it just regular stuff around the house, or are you finding a area, or what are you doing?
Is it just regular around the house? Boy, you made it sound so exciting. Yeah, let's go see the guy that talks about regular stuff. I always tell people, here's the truth. They say, where do you get your material? And I said, well, here's the thing. I am not smart enough to make anything up. So all I can do is I tell you what happened to me. And people laugh and they go, oh, that just happened to me. And It turns out the conversations I'm having with my kids and the frustrations in home with my wife or with the neighbors or with, trying to figure out whatever the newest technology is, people are going, I'm so glad you said that, because we were having that same discussion. So, it's all, hopefully is all very universal and personal too.
Yeah. So you've got that common man type relatability type thing where what you find is funny, everybody else seems to agree.
Well, you hope so. Once in a while you go, oh, maybe that's just me that finds that funny.
Well, I wanted to get in a little bit into your career post stand-up a little bit, or as you were standing up. But like I said, Diner is a big movie for me. Most of my friends saw the movie before I did. I was a senior in college, and they all came back to my house and said, I was you. They said, you are Modell. And I saw the movie, and I had to agree that, part of that is true.
You went to school in Chicago?
Northern Illinois and DeKalb, which is west of Chicago, yeah.
Okay.
But regardless, tell me a little bit about Diner. How'd you get the part, and what was it like filming that movie? Was it all improv or script? It seemed improv to me.
Yeah. It was a beautiful script, and 90% of it was scripted. But the stuff within the Diner itself, the director, Barry Levinson, that was his first film, believe it or not. Right. And he went on to obviously a really prolific and great career. He was smart enough to know, let's shoot this diner scenes last, after the guys have been living together and cranky and get to know each other and can bust each other's chops, which is what you wanted. So in those scenes, a lot of times we had a scene that was written, and he would just let the cameras roll, and we would all, now what do we do? And then we just, we're 4 or 5 guys sitting eating a sandwich, and that's just what came up. And then sometimes he would go, try that again, but maybe say that thing, and then that was the way he would direct. He would. I used to say he would have sentences that had no words in them. He goes, the thing, but then like maybe there was I don't know what he said, but I got the idea. And it worked.
And for those who don't know, it's a movie about friends, really, and there's some Baltimore Colts humor in there and all sorts of things. How would you describe your friendship in that group? I mean, you seem to be kind of the oddball there.
I was the fifth wheel, or the sixth wheel, I guess. What it really is about, it was about guys trying to figure out women. And, it's all you talk about. You talk about football and you talk about girls. And then no matter what your date was or what your social life is, the end of the night, these guys would get together. It was 1959, right. At the cusp of the new decade. And these guys, Barry Levinson used to say, it's sort of like tribal, like they get together, sit around the campfire and just scratch their heads and try and figure out girls. And, it's a never-ending discussion. But my character, it was always five guys. It was Kevin Bacon and Danny Stern, Steve Guttenberg, Timothy Daly, and Mickey Rourke. And my character was really it was just mentioned in the script. It had no lines. So when I met, and he said, there's going to be a sixth guy. I want this guy Modell, and he's going to be sort of funny guy, and I don't know what he's going to be. I went, I don't care. I'm just so thrilled to be in a movie. Are you kidding? It was MGM, and it was, I'd never been in a movie or anything. It was my first job, my first time ever seeing a camera. So to fall into such good fortune was really an amazing twist of fate. And so sometimes he would just give me, say, when you go, maybe ask him for, what I remember, we did that roast beef scene with the sandwich, and the next day he said, when you're leaving the diner, remember the thing you did? Maybe ask him for a ride, but don't ask him. I'm like, okay. And then, we would just do that. And in my head, I'm thinking, this doesn't seem like it's going to be that funny. And then I saw how he edited it. I went, oh, he really, he had a great eye, and he made this story and this connection. So I always tell my friends, I'm the guy not on the poster. If you look at the poster really carefully, you don't see me.
And the reason you're not on the poster is you're doing the stand-up at the wedding, and they're sitting around the table.
There you go. There you go. Exactly right.
Now, there's a story as to how you got the role, right?
Yeah, the role, I always tell people, there's no rules or plan in show business. And that, that opened up my career, and it was 100% accident. And I was going with a friend. We were going out to lunch, and he said, I got to drop off a picture at this casting office. They're filming a movie. So he was just going, and I was sitting outside in the lobby waiting for him. And the casting director came out and looked at me and said, why don't you come in? And I said, no. And I tried really hard. I said, I'm just waiting for my friend. I'm not up for this. And she said, why don't you come back tomorrow with a picture and meet the director, Barry Levinson? And I did. And it wasn't an audition so much. We just sat and talked. And he was a great fan of comedy, and he was a comic himself. So we sat and talked about an hour, and he said, all right, great. I went, really? Is that how show business works? We just sit and BS for an hour? And about 2 weeks later, I got a call. Can you be in Baltimore next week? You got the part. I went, oh. And, as I say, it was exciting to be in anything. And I can't say I knew enough to know that it was going to be such a terrific movie, or such a pivotal movie, really. I mean, there's so many movies and shows that grew out of, the son of Diner, that was, that it was ahead of its time in that sort of dialogue heavy, story light films that were really about just the discussions that characters had. So that opened every door for me. I mean, from that, I got Beverly Hills Cop, and from Beverly Hills Cop, I got Aliens, and from Alien, and I can draw a line straight through from walking into that office by accident in 1981.
Well, Paul, we're gonna take a break, and then we're gonna come back, and we're gonna talk about those movies that you just mentioned. The real legacy of Diner is, of course, French fries and gravy, as you would agree, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. All right, so we're going to take a word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back, Paul, to talk about the rest of your glorious career.
Hello, friends. This is Ray Rogina. Are you looking for the place to be? Voted best live music and entertainment venue by the Daily Herald in 2023? That would be Old Republic in Elgin, an indoor-outdoor hub with classic American eats, beer, and cocktails, plus the best sports bar, burgers, wings, and ribs. Best value? Old Republic. Another good place to be.
Watch me.
Well, we're back with famed comedian Paul Reiser. Remember, March 8th, Batavia Fine Arts Centre. He'll be appearing one night only, 7:30, and we'll talk a little bit about how you can get tickets later on. Paul, Pat alluded to, you actually mentioned Beverly Hills Cop and Aliens. And of course, my question, I guess, on that is simple. How would you compare and contrast those two movies? 84 is Beverly Hills Cop, sequel in 87. And I want to talk a little bit about something coming out here in 2024, Axel F, but we'll get to that in a second. How would you compare and contrast your roles as Detective Jeffrey Freeman and then the corrupt, and I repeat, the corrupt Carter Burke in Alien?
Well, first of all, I haven't heard the compare and contrast phrase since high school history exam.
I'm a high school teacher by trade, so.
Are you?
Yes,
right.
I am.
Do I have to compare and contrast Mesopotamian trade with the Phoenicians, with the early Phoenicians as vis-a-vis? Well, let's go back a second there. You say that my character in Aliens was corrupt. I'm going to say misunderstood.
All right.
Huh? You know what I mean? Yeah.
But
he could be a pussycat. You know, by the way, next month there will be the release of the first, there's a comic book coming out, Marvel comic book, a what if my character had lived. And I get to finally, 35 years later, look into that possibility that, well, maybe he really wasn't such a bad guy. And maybe there was a reason it didn't turn out well, but perhaps it was well intended. And very excited about that because it's been a running joke for me with 35 years. And then suddenly they came up with this idea. I went, we can finally tell my story. Burke was just misunderstood.
Working with Eddie Murphy, though, and Beverly Hills Cop had to be interesting.
Well, you know what? I don't get enough credit for this. When the first Beverly Hills Cop came out, I decided to give Eddie Murphy the bigger role. And I took a very small role. And I think it helped his career enormously. Well, the funny thing is I knew Eddie before the movie. I knew Eddie from the comedy clubs. And he was, even before I met him, he was sort of legendary. We were all 21, 22, and we kept hearing about this 16-year-old kid out on the island. You know, we were in New York, in Manhattan, and the island was just a little bit off. But there was this talk, this kid, and I remember thinking, well, how funny could a 16-year-old, 17-year-old kid be? And then he came in the first night, he went on stage, and we all went, oh, this kid is talented. He was just funny and confident and great from the get-go. So when I had that little role, and I probably would have otherwise been intimidated by it because he's already a big star, Saturday Night Live and 48 Hours. But we had this, ease of comfort that comics have with each other. So we were able to play a little bit, and then they did the second one, and then when we shot the fourth one, which will come out this summer on Netflix, it was just sort of surreal looking at each other and going, it's 40 years later, and we're making sort of callbacks to jokes that we made in 1982. It's surreal.
As an actor, is there any difference? I mean, these two movies here, you've got Beverly Hills Cop, a lot of action with the cars and shooting and so on and so forth. And then you have Alien, all this technical equipment and so on. How do you deal with all of that? I mean, it just seems
Alien, one of my great saving graces is my naivete and ignorance. I don't know how any of this stuff works. So in Aliens, the script was unbelievably gripping and great. I mean, just reading it on the page, you're sweating and out of breath. And Jim Cameron had done Terminator, so this guy knew what he was doing. And Sigourney Weaver is obviously Sigourney Weaver. So I said, well, this is going to be great. How it gets made, I don't know. I'd be on the set. And some days we were there, you're with the other actors. Sometimes you're against sort of, I don't remember, it was a green screen. And a lot of it, what you see, the action stuff was actually miniatures, it was so brilliant. Those things blowing up and ships were like toys. And you can't really be hard pressed to tell which, frame by frame, what's real and what's miniature. but they would have these guys, not to spoil the movie for you, but those aliens were not real. Those were actors. And they would be like British, we shot in London and outside London. And they were all athletes or dancers or, physical guys or stunt guys. And they would be wearing these things. And then lunchtime, they take off their head, but they still got the body on. So you're sitting there trying to have a conversation with a guy. And go, you seem very polite, but you got like 4 arms and tentacles. I can't really sit with you. So it was just, it was absurd. But
we are going to have a sequel, though, to Beverly Hills Cop this summer, as you said.
Yes.
XLF, right?
Correct. That'll be on Netflix. I don't know the date, but sometime this summer. I have only seen the trailer, and it looks great.
One other movie I want to talk about, only because I love your co-star, and you wrote the movie and starred with him. The Thing About My Folks with the late Peter.
Oh, God bless you. Yeah.
I guess my question is this. Peter Falk is Columbo. We'll always remember him as Columbo. Maybe I'm asking a comedian this question. Do you think you could have played Columbo?
No, I don't think anybody could have played Columbo. I mean, somebody would have, and it would have been different. But, that was such a global phenomenon. I mean, people in every country watched Columbo. I mean, you go anywhere and you go, oh, Columbo. There was even, I forget the details, but it was somewhere there was like the beginnings of a war. Maybe it was Hungary or Eastern Europe somewhere. And the leaders asked Peter Falk to, I don't know if he made a recording or he came out, but they were literally, it was a ceasefire, a pause in the action brokered by Peter as Columbo. I mean, that's how internationally loved he was. My affection for him was started when I was a kid. I remember I saw Robin and the Seven Hoods. I don't know, maybe I was 8 or 9, 10, something like that. And it was a silly movie with Sammy Davis, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, gangsters in the 20s. But Peter Falk was so funny and different, and I just was so drawn to him. And I was a fan of his in a way that I never, I didn't feel that way about any other actors. But Peter Falk always grabbed me, and I just had this dream of someday writing something to work with him. And I wrote this movie where he played my father.
Right.
It got it to him, and to my great joy, he said, "Yeah, man, we got to go do this movie." So next thing you know, we're in upstate New York making this movie, which was really a sort of a love letter to my parents. It was, it was my attempt.
Question.
Yeah, well, and I see this with my kids now. They're in their 20s. When you're growing up, you can't help but think of your parents as parents. That's all they are. And only as you get older, you realize, oh, they didn't start as parents. They were also 20, and they started dating, and they were in love. Things changed. So I was always intrigued by what were my parents like? And I'm the 4th of 4 kids, so I got the most tired version of them. So I always wondered, what were they like when they met? They must have been a little different. And so I got to envision that through Peter Falk and Olympia Dukakis, which is another dream come true. Right. So it was a beautiful, sweet movie. And I thank you for bringing it up, because that movie made over $400 domestically.
Cash.
All cash, exactly. That was me standing at the door with a little hat.
Pat?
I wanted to talk a little bit about TV, but before I do, I would say that you would make a great Columbo. You have that pause in the way you speak, and I think you have the intellectual capacity to have done the job. Yeah,
well, I'll make some calls, see what we can do.
Yeah, reboot. You've done the reboot. We can do a reboot of Columbo.
There you go.
So we got to talk about Mad About You, obviously, how that started, and it's my understanding you wrote the theme song, which is relatively unusual, right? And the residuals are pouring in on that, I'm sure.
Every time you hum it, I make over 4 rubles. No, that was, that came about from my stand-up. I was doing, my stand-up was I had just gotten married, I think, or was just about to be married. Yeah, no, we had just been married. And I was approached by a studio to develop a show for yourself. That was very common, it probably still is, to see a funny comedian, hey, let's make a show. And I wasn't itching to do a show, and a lot of, when you sit and come up with an idea for a TV show, very often it's as wacky and it's conceptual. And I said, if I was going to do a show, I'd want it to be really small, because it's really the only thing that interests me, really. As I said, I can't make anything up. But my act was really all about these absurd conversations I was having with my then fiance or girlfriend as we living together. And that was suddenly when I started finding my legs as a comedian. I went, oh, this seems to be strong for me. This is what I can do. I can't do that. I can't do that, but I do this. And so when I pitched the idea, I said, it'll just be really small. And they said, well, go write it. And the pitch was, I said, here's the pitch. I said, when you're at a party with your wife or your husband, and you're all being at your best behavior and you're socializing, you're having a great time, and then you say goodnight, you get into the car, and the minute that car door slams, that's the show. That's when one of you goes, why did you say that? I didn't realize I wasn't supposed to. Yeah, I told you not to. It's like that. I haven't seen that. Right. And that was, and that stuff is a bottomless pit of funny and drama, So when we wrote the show, we had a room full of great writers, men and women, and we'd all come in with our stories, like, listen to this conversation we had, listen to the fight I got in, and it would all find its way into the scripts.
Yeah. Well, you and Helen Hunt, you really gelled together, and obviously I think you guys had to like each other off screen because it showed on screen that you guys were really. Yeah. We hit it off. And when it's another bit of good fortune, when I was writing the show, the pilot, and I didn't really have any actors in mind. I was envisioning, if anything, I was envisioning somebody who looked like my wife, brown hair and brown eyes, and not at all Helen Hunt. And we were invited. My wife was very good friends of Helen's. And Helen and this friend had a dinner party together and invited about 8 people. And we were invited. And I had never met Helen. And this was I was in the midst of writing it. And I just was intrigued. And I thought Helen was just really funny and lovely in a very accessible way. She wasn't glamoury. She was just like, oh, she's just a real person and funny and really, really smart. And as we left the party, I turned to my wife. I said, well, what do you think about her as you? She said, I think that would work. So, you make the best plans. Like, no, let's go with this woman who looks totally different than what you had in mind. But we just hit it off from the beginning. And we did. We enjoyed each other's company. When we did the little revisit a few years ago, we did a 12-episode one time only. And we had sworn beforehand that we were never going to do that. We weren't going to come back. We ended it well. Let's leave it alone. But when people started asking us, like, well, all these reboots, would you guys want to do it? And when we talked about it, the thing that jumped at us, like, it'll be really fun. We had such a great time, and we did. So, and we wrote them together with a little small writer's room, and it was crazy because it was as if we had been gone a weekend. It didn't feel like 20 years later. It was like, oh my goodness, we know what we're doing. Well, we'll have to add the casting to your many, many roles that you had over time. Some of these other shows, obviously, the Kominsky Method, I enjoyed that. You got to work with Alan Arkin, Peter Falk-esque type actor, right?
Well, that was my list of actors who I revered growing up was right there. It was Peter Falk and Alan Arkin and Jack Lemmon, I would say. And they all had something in common. They were all brilliantly funny, brilliantly dramatic, and could shift in a moment from one to the other. And I didn't know that's what it was, but that's part of what I loved about all of them. And Peter Falk and Alan Arkin in The In-Laws, one of my favorite movies of all time. And I didn't get to work too much with Alan on the Kominsky Method. I wish we had more. And but we had one great day together, and I got some laughs out of him, and I felt like, you know what? If nothing else happens, I'm good with that. I made Alan Arkin laugh.
Sure.
I'll take it.
And then, of course, you have your fame now. The Duffer Brothers apparently wrote you into Stranger Things, and now you've got a whole new generation of fans, right?
Go figure. Yeah. It's funny. I can tell when people come to my live shows, my stand-up shows, where I'll be at the Batavia Performing Arts Centre on March 8th. I can look when they're coming in. I can pretty much gauge where they know me from. If they're under 25, probably Stranger Things. If they're 50s, 60s, it's probably Mad About You. If they're 70s, it's Kominsky Method. And if they have a lot of tattoos, it's The Boys. I can tell.
We're here for you. Well, it's all about the big show, March 8th, 7:30 p.m. This is part of a national tour, Paul, called the Big Font Tour. What's with the name?
Somebody said, why is it called the Big Font? I said, you know how old I am, right? Why do you think it's called the Big Font Tour? I was driving to a show. A buddy of mine came along, and I had my little notes, my cheat sheet, and I had it in just big ass size 48 letters. And he went, how old are you? I went, I have to see it I can't hold it on stage. I need to be able to see it. I need a big font. He said, that should be the name. I said, that's the name of the tour, the Big Font Tour. It sounds like it's important, and it's just actually medicinal.
They're not cue cards, they're construction size, that kind of thing. Well, if we're interested in what Paul's doing after March 8th, he has his own website, paulreiser.com. I'm sure you have plenty of things that you're going to be doing, movies, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, we'll talk about them all. One of the fun things I get to do on the show, on stand-up shows, towards the end of the show, I'll take questions from the audience, which is always fun because I never know what people are going to ask. But they are free to come and ask anything, and if I can answer it, I will. But just don't ask me what happens on season 5 of Stranger Things because I don't know. Nobody tells me. But I'm looking forward. It should be always a good time in the Chicago area.
Well, we really appreciate your time and your generosity. We wish you the best of luck. It's March 8th, 7:30 p.m. You can get tickets at the Batavia Fine Arts Centre.org website. It's very simple to get tickets, and we wish you the very best of luck. Thanks for coming to Batavia.
Appreciate the time. Great talking to both of you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Paul.
Take care now.
Take care.
Well, we're back with some closing comments. And Pat, boy, I'm exhausted only because we covered a lot about a guy who's done a lot.
Yeah.
All the different modes of art, if you will, he's involved in.
In the future, maybe our podcast should have less talented people on the air so that we don't have to cover so many things. But I mean, writer, producer, composer, actor, comedian. What am I missing here? Author, right? I got that. It's just amazing.
Stand-up comic.
Right, stand-up comic. He's an amazing guy. He makes me laugh. He's made me laugh since Diner. And, maybe he doesn't make everybody laugh, but he certainly works for me. It's a big show, March 8th, 7:30. Have you ever been to the Batavia Fine Arts Centre, Ray?
I actually participated in a panel discussion. I actually conducted the panel discussion on stage. It's a fine facility. It's a hidden gem, I think, over on the west side of Batavia. And it's a great facility. And he will do well there on stage. No question about it.
I assume it's bigger than the Comedy Vault.
Oh, much bigger. I'd put it on the same level and size as the Norris Center in St. Charles.
Maybe a guy like me could fill the Comedy Vault, but when you're talking Paul Reiser,
well,
the big stage.
I'm glad you bring that up because, again, we've talked about this. I'm going to keep pushing you in the Comedy Vault, and we'll see what happens here. In fact, I'm going to mention that in my closing here. By the way, before we do leave the air, we do want to let our audience know, once again, you can find us on YouTube. That's the easiest way to do it. You can get past performances to your...
You just punch it into the search box, right, Ray?
Just a couple of guys.
And then you put the notifications on, and every new show, you get a notification.
Subscribe. Exactly right. As you said last time, doesn't cost a dime. So we want to do that. Then, as always, make sure you do support our sponsors. They're wonderful people. They've given us the opportunity to fill the air here the last couple of years, and we're not done yet. We're rolling along here, and we've got some nice programming for March, which includes on next week a trip down memory lane by talking to some of the great legendary Fox Valley athletes at Pal Joey's in Batavia. Speaking of Batavia, we'll be in Batavia again.
Batavia, yeah.
And then later on in the month, we hope to do our annual baseball preview with our guy at the Cougars, Curtis Haug, the general manager. And there'll be other opportunities as we go along here. So you stay tuned. The programming will be great. So, as I would say again, for our illustrious crack producer, Paul Stukel, owner of Nexus Publishing. Pat,
I continue to be impressed by it. Yes.
Tax purposes, though, I thought.
Tax purposes.
And Paul is willing to bet the farm, I think, on the Illini in the NCAA tournament. And for our funny guy, Pat Crimmins, who thinks he is Modell from Diner and who will perform eventually at the Comedy Vault in Batavia again. And we'll be there to bring that all to you when that happens. So stay tuned for that. This is Ray Rogina, the other guy in Just a Couple of Guys.
Co-host.
Talking everything and anything. Wishing you a pleasant week as spring presents itself, hopefully sooner than later.
Are you going to give me a birthday shout out? You know, when the older you get, the more you cling to these things because you're so close to death. You know what I mean?
Or a stroke, as Paul Reiser said. Listen, I try to keep all personal things personal.
Oh, sure.
That, since you brought it up.
Well, I'm desperate, Ray. As you know, there's a state of desperation.
For the reason you brought it up, I'm going to say to our audience, make sure you send Pat a birthday card on Friday, February 23rd. Maybe put some money in it or a gift card or whatever the case.
I would appreciate cash in an envelope.
Pat, birthday. I'm not going to tell you the number, but we could conduct a little game and you can guess Pat's age. And I can assure you that it is over 40. Over 40.
Over 40. Those were good times.
So again, Pat and Ray, just a couple of guys from our Zoom studios in both St. Charles and Geneva.
Worldwide, Taipei, Aurora, and of course, St. Charles.
He does think he's Modell, doesn't he? So long, everybody.
What is that, roast beef?
Don't ask me this anymore, Modell. Yes.
You gonna finish that?
Yeah, I'm gonna finish it. I paid for it. I'm not gonna give it to you. No.
If you're not gonna finish it, I would eat it. But if you're gonna eat it, you're gonna...
What do you want? Say the words.
No, go ahead. You're gonna eat it. You eat it. That's all right.
Say the words. I want the roast beef sandwich. Say the words, and I'll give you a piece.
Would you guys cut this out? I mean, every time.
Well, if he doesn't talk, he just...
Well, you know what he means, right?